You're beginning in the sense that you're starting the journey of building a company, and you now need to start thinking of skills outside your core technical competency. The fourth one there, of course, is when you now become a manager. Now when you start becoming removed from the day-to-day technical activities of an organization, you're beginning in the sense that you now need to let go. And that's also a journey in itself. So you're a beginner in that sense. So that's how I think of being a beginner, and each level needs you to adapt to different skills, which is what now we'll dive into a bit later.
That's great. Sheilah has dealt with so many developers. I think for the past 3-4 years, she's seen almost all the guys here on this panel. And having dealt with developers, she's the one who gets asked about who is a good developer. Please refer me, I need someone to do this and do that, do this. And she faces a lot of challenges, just getting quality guys who can deliver. So, in your experiences, can you pinpoint some of the things that you faced with clients?
Okay, so we get a lot of complaints, if I can put it that way, from clients who sometimes want very big problems solved, but they have very tiny budgets. But then they meet expert beginners who say, yes, we can do it, and then this guy wants to pay them, say, 30,000, and then they don't deliver, and then they go under. So they switch off their phones, they don't reply their emails, and then they say they are from MLab or iHub. So this client comes, says they want their money. So we get a lot of that, but the most extreme that I've seen was this lawyer who had worked with one of the developers, and it was just the worst time possible during that bill, and he was just saying how he wants the ICT bill to go through because he's met enough developers who just want to take people's money and go with them. So, but then I would say the difference between, say, such clients who are not exposed and then developers who will take anything and say they'll deliver and definitely know they won't deliver is both of them don't do enough research. Because, for instance, if this person would have done enough research about the skills available in the market and even how to cost, for instance, the project, then it would be a different story. For developers, for instance, they don't have contracts. They don't even know how to negotiate contracts. Expert beginners. So they meet someone, they say, we will pay you this amount of money. They don't negotiate. They're like, well, if I get 15 of such, I mean 30,000 of 15 projects in a month, that's not a bad cut, you know. So we get a lot of that. But then also there are those people who have graduated from school, like Caine said, and when they come to the market, most of them, what happens is, you know someone who was, for instance, in JQuat with you, they are now a freelancer, and when you're in school, you're good in coding in one language. So they recruit you and work with you, but then you also don't deliver. And this person, because they also have a lot of projects, sometimes they send some clients to you. So I would say it's expert beginners could be also clients who have never worked with devs, so they don't really know how to work with devs. Yeah.
So let's see from the audience, how many freelancers do we have around? It's a good number. People working in startups as devs. They are startups. Okay, that's nice. I would like Kago, Caine, and Mari to look back at the early days. You can go as early as Pascal VB days. How that has changed to where we are now, as an individual and as a company. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can share my own story. Back when I think I really had a big fail. I think what really changed from me being like an expert beginner who says they can do anything and then fails to do it, to actually being able to own that process and start to anticipate what could go wrong was in 2008 when the company I was working for were doing a Safaricom, a way for you to pay for Safaricom shares at Blair through M-Pesa. And so back then we didn't have we didn't have like M-Pesa APIs, there was not a lot of even online transactions. And so what we did is we had like a computer that was hosted at Swift Global, connected to a phone, and it would be passing the SMSs using like C#.net and stuff. And I remember I focused so much on that like fun part of the project that I didn't really think about the back end. And so we were presenting along with my boss to the head of Blair, who was Jim Nambaru. And we're kind of, we've loaded the presentation, we've talked about everything the app is going to do, we've paid for kind of the shares, we sent M-Pesa to Blair. And then when we load the screen, you get your big system error. And then you have that fast excuse, it's like, oh no, this is just because the cache has not been updated. And then you kind of do something where you're really writing code in the back, and then you refresh it again, and then it goes like for 3 pages, and then it fails, and then it fails. And I think what my boss did that was very good is he wasn't angry, he wasn't mad, he just said nothing. He was like, hey, okay, so we've seen there's some problems, you need to work on them. And I think kind of that attitude of if something fails, that we're able to go back, fix it very quickly and say, we fixed it, this is what was wrong, this is how it's never going to happen again. I think that kind of thinking is what really helped me to rise above, just being an expert beginner who, when I was working like with other clients, if something failed, you kind of disappear, or like, okay, you think like everything ended. And so that's what I apply to startups, that's what I try and apply to my devs, is that if you're doing something where you don't know what's going on, you need to really find out how to troubleshoot. I think troubleshooting and finding out where you went wrong is the biggest problem, and trying to fix that as soon as possible, because the truth is that you effed up. So when you F up, you have to really, go back to the problem and say, hey, I can solve this immediately, so that people will see it's almost like you're still an expert. You might be a beginner, but you're still an expert in that you know kind of where you're going wrong, and you're doing that. And I've applied that not just in how I code, but when I started managing the devs, it's like looking at motivations, it's like, where are you failing, where are you messing up, can you do that? Now that I moved from there, now I'm in charge of where the company vision is going. I'm in charge of investors who didn't talk to me a lot because I was just that guy who talks to the computers and manages the dev team. I also think of that problem is that when you drop a conversation with an investor because you're just like, do I need to talk to them every month or every week or things like that, it's like you're constantly looking at where you're really messing up and making sure that you're setting systems in place for that never to happen. One example, for example, is at Eneza, we haven't been really great about our testing. And so, everyone who would look at us would say, okay, like what kind of software company is that which does not have tests? But on the flip side, we have about like 100 monitoring scripts. So yes, we haven't written the tests, but there's little bots that are on the platform. If something goes wrong or didn't work in the same way, even if it's not integrated to that same code, they're independent apps that tell us, hey, here you're messing up, here you're messing up. So, even if it's harder, we have that resistance to try testing. We've been able to overcome that, using our own innovative methods. And that's how I've kind of handled the expert beginner situation when it comes to me and the startup.
I think anyone who's been a dev knows that anything that can go wrong has gone wrong at one point when you're in the middle of demoing for a big client. And I remember when I was changed from college, and at that point I was an expert beginner. But of course, when you're doing your interviews, you're asked how many languages can you do, and you mention all of them that you played around, even if you're not very familiar with. And at that point, we worked in an organization that built a lot of websites, and we were building them with WordPress. And this was, I think, back in 2008. Not that old. And then there was this wave of hacking that was happening with websites. We would wake up, get to work in the morning, and all the websites we built had this black screen with
weird Russian stuff. And the company worked with the owner of the company was not really a techie, but had seen the opportunities of all the companies that did websites at that point. And so we were the experts and it looked to us at what's happening. And at that point we were like, I think someone is just targeting us for some reason. And at first the thing we used to do is just, you have a backup, delete that DB, put a new one, and you're good to go. And it took a minute for us to realize, we needed to sit down and start figuring out like where was the problem coming from. And this was the root of how we were coding and how we were doing our websites from the beginning and connecting our databases. So moving from that, I think we can talk about Pascal, but I think I don't know. We read that like as history. When we first started, we did straight PHP and we weren't very conversant with Kohana or Laravel. Today, it took a minute for you to go out, and I think it just comes internally when you're just used to, and communities, when you go and sit with people and the developers and meetups and they're talking about, oh, I'm using this platform to do ABCD, what do you guys use at your company? And you're like, oh, I feel left out. I need to go and figure out, what this other platform is, and I need to use. I think that's the journey of being an expert, and I believe for you to actually be able to call yourself an expert, you have to be in a full cycle of a project. Be there from the beginning, not coming in and find the system was done, the architecture was done, to be able to be there from the beginning, to designing, to implementing, to coding it, and to testing with the users. Then you can be able to appreciate the process and be able to know to call yourself an expert. In my opinion. Yeah.
I actually have a Pascal story. Interesting enough. But the reason I talked about the 4 stages is, in one way or another, I've experienced them. So this actually goes back all the way back to high school. So our teacher at that time decided that we would not use VB. So as I was a computer science student in high school, we had to do a project in Pascal. And that year's exam was happening to assess us on the ability to make a system for a dairy company. So we had to build a system where they could manage farmers, manage intakes, and that's what the whole project was focused on. So shortly after high school, I happened to meet someone who needed such a system. And I was like, great. Let me just take what I did, give it to him, and we'll be good to go. I thought it would be very easy. Of course, needless to say, that never worked. It's almost impossible to take what you did for one client or one project and repurpose it for another client, unless it's a software as a service. But of course, in this case, that wasn't what was happening. So the first lesson there I learned was every client is unique, and each one needs to be given their own consideration when building a platform for them. Repurposing, yes, works nowadays, but the key point remains is you must understand what the client needs. Shortly after university, I happened to work on a project, and because you feel that you've just completed or you just graduated and now you feel you're on top of the world, some old habits I had. So I'm sure most of us started with using FTP to upload files to servers. Is anyone who didn't start that way? I'll be interested to know. Oh, okay, I have one person. So yes, we start with this FTP. I actually used SVN quite a bit before settling on Git. But what the outcome there was basically, how do you manage your processes? As a developer, once you're in the professional marketplace, standards matter. And if you don't follow the right standards, you run the risk of a project going wrong. Imagine using FTP and your laptop getting stolen or your laptop getting spoiled, what do you then tell the client? Luckily that didn't happen, but the fact that process wasn't followed, of course, exposed a massive risk to myself and the people I was working for. With consulting, the risk or the challenge when you're an expert beginner is how to price, or how to understand the value of your time and your client's time. There are many underlying reasons, but I'll just touch on two of them. One is what I would call, is this a client who's ready to invest in IT? If you think about the local market for the last 10 years, everyone has been talking about automation systems, they want M-Pesa to work with their service, which is all good, but do they understand the investment required to get the product to the level that it needs to be at? So you talk to someone, you'll agree, and if they tell you the budget is X, because you really want the money, because you just started out in the marketplace, you'll say yes and take the funds. The problem there is, one, are you taking the funds just for the sake of getting the deposit? Or are you really, or does the client really understand what it takes to get the project completed? So, to be honest, this is something one will learn over time. You're very unlikely to not make a mistake when you're starting out as a consultant or a freelancer. The only thing there is how do you mitigate the risk? So it just comes down to understanding what's the value of your time. That's one. Is the client ready to accept what you're willing to offer? And what's the client's understanding of that technology? Or of the technology process? Meaning, if they're always calling you every week asking for changes, and you gladly agree to that, you're basically setting yourself up for a challenge further down the road, because you don't have a process by which you're following what you're building. Which is something one may do either to please the client or for a reason maybe best known to them, but not working lockstep with the client and making them understand what the effect of the changes will be is a risk I've seen quite a lot when you're starting out in the consulting or even in employment. When your boss asks you, do this thing, I want to see this feature, one has to know where to, well, not put their foot down, but explain the consequences of going a certain path. The other part to this, of course, is taking on too many projects. The interesting thing is, in my work at Twiga, I've seen this happen in the non-tech space. Why do I say this? When we buy produce from farmers, bananas for example, they have the price they're willing to sell at, but then they'll always add a margin of 30%. Reason being, they say, I might not get the money when the broker takes the produce. So how it works is you give it to the broker who then sell it at Wakulima, one of the main markets in Nairobi, and then only when they get the money will that trickle down back to the farmer. So if the broker doesn't happen to sell the produce, the farmer doesn't get paid. So naturally the reaction is, look, I have to price in risk to make sure I cover any potential losses. And I think that's something we do as developers, where we'll take on 3 projects because you think a client will not pay you on time. So you always want to make sure you're covered. The only challenge is that you end up stretching yourself, and at the end of the day, no one is happy. You're not happy because one, you're not going to get paid unless you finish, and two, the client is not happy because you're taking too long to do their work. So the question there is, how do I understand risk? How do I price it? What milestones am I using to get paid or remunerated? And then managing that is something that should help in bringing down that expert beginner culture of taking on too many projects. At the managerial level, the expert beginner risk there is learning how to let go. So imagine yourself as a co-founder or the CTO of a company, where initially you are basically a full stack developer, where you're working on the front end app, the back end infrastructure, documentation. And then as the company grows, you realize that you can't keep your eyes on everything. And actually by doing that, you're stretching yourself thin. So the idea is, how do I transition from building code to actually managing coders? One can understand why someone in management would want to be involved in the day-to-day, because they feel it's their baby. But learning to let go is a key skill, which will help now de-risk the expert beginner culture at the managerial level. So those are my thoughts, and some of those are my experiences, and just understanding those risks and mitigating them is quite key now, getting rid of that expert beginner culture. Thanks.
Yes, getting a little bit more technical now on I'd like the panel to think about the tools, the stack, the processes that currently exist, and compare it with how it was before. I think Kago has talked about tests, Caine has talked about starting with FTP. And as I think about that, I will share one of the experiences we had at Mobidev. And this was actually pretty recent, last year, beginning of last year. And the team was good, like application development, and we thought we knew everything. And then we were tasked with connecting to Vodacom, TZ. And as a developer, when you're told to integrate systems, the first thing that comes to your mind is, hey, send me the API documentation. Just send me the API documentation, I'll do it. Whether it's SOAP, it's JSON, whatever it is, as long as it's documented well. Then the challenge we had then was we had a number of application servers on Amazon, and the first requirement we needed from the telco side was a VPN connection. Yes, you're software devs, and this is a networking issue. Yes, and that's the first thing. I think that's the first time on a massive scale that, yes, there's documentation to set up the VPN, but it's not working. And it's not working at all. It was just messy all through. But eventually it worked, and of course we knew what we did not know. Moved on. Okay, so I'd like to see from the panelists your tools, your processes, so that we expert beginners can compare and see if we are better than you or we are way below.
I mean, a number of dev groups, Android, Ruby.js. I think the biggest thing, I think tools-wise, everyone has like the right tools. I think the problem is really thinking about usually like the hidden business sides of the challenge. I'm sure everyone here, every dev here knows about GitHub, knows about Ansible. Those are things you can pick up and do that. I think the biggest learning that I have is how are you treating your processes, like he said. So on the developer side, I think one thing that really helped me is starting to do job scoping with clients, for example. So I feel like that's a tool in itself. Of that, when you start a project with a client, make sure the client understands you're only going to do A, B, C, D. You know, and it's not going to go further than that. That's what the money paid for. And don't feel bad. Even as when I was building for Eneza, I always found myself overworking myself because I wanted to add that extra nicety to that feature, and then that becomes like its own monster, and then I'm trying to like now, fix the bugs in that and, try and manage that. So it's always like, as a developer, the tool is to scope the job for yourself. Like, the work starts here and ends here. The second thing is definitely on the invoicing, money, and tax side as well, because I've seen cases where, I feel like in Kenya, especially when you have someone starting and they're looking for a developer, it's almost like a developer is a fundi for software. So, it's like, I have this idea, can you do it? No, this table doesn't look well. Okay, it looks nice. Okay, we've spent too long with each other, just here, take the money. And, there's no invoicing on any one side. And to think that this is a developer who's on GitHub, is reading about companies, wants to grow a big company, and yet hasn't even started doing like their own invoicing and their own tax, I find that that's like a fundi mentality, and they're going to remain in that mentality if that's what they're doing, Sometimes when I'm speaking to developers, they're like, hey, I'm being paid this much by my company, and I'm like, well, I can't pay you that much, but are your company paying taxes for you? And you find that there's a lot of startups even in the space who are doing this, what do you call it? They're doing this consultant thing where the developer is not really like an employee, so they don't pay the tax, and the developer is getting all this money from their employer, contractor, and they're not even really kind of doing the tax and NHIF and all this stuff. I think all this stuff is especially important if you're a startup, and invoicing and doing your own taxes, setting up your own business name, which is really just a personal, professional side of you. All these things are extremely important because they can't come to bite you, later. And then I think on the client side as well, making sure, a lot of clients who, maybe one or two who just became really sour and then we ended up not working together, I think they can also set up tools for themselves, like making sure their contracts in place. They can find contracts for how to work with developers, just like you can find contracts for everything else, and making sure that the developer has something signed. Another thing they can do is making sure that they're leading the communication with the developer, so the developer is never having, is never going quiet for too long. I think for the clients who I work with the best, we do things like weekly lunch. And if I didn't come for the weekly lunch, then the client knew something was wrong. And so that's something that I could, even for me, it felt worse missing the weekly lunches, and it felt worse kind of being stuck when I was coding. And so I try and make up for the next weekly lunch, and then we kind of have this conversation of, okay, this is what is working. So in that way, you can create those processes for communication and for making sure it's contracted, so that it's just kind of formalizing in some sort of way. I think those are the most important tools for overcoming the beginner mentality that we've used.
I am a strong believer in structures. And I think Wanjau mentioned this in her presentation about developing your soft skills. And I think for most, not just expert beginners, for most devs in general, you want to make sure you are a perfect coder, but then you forget sometimes that in business you also need to negotiate. For instance, you need to know about things that Kago mentioned, and unless you also develop those skills, then it becomes really hard for you to grow as a business person. Forget the coding bit. You want to build people, you have to understand how that process goes about. And I think it doesn't have to be physical. It could be that you use tools to help you do this. We were having a conversation yesterday, and Caine mentioned about understanding the personalities of people you're working with and finding the right tools to make sure that they communicate the right way with you. Because there are people who don't want to interact with people, and that's fine. But then there are tools to help these people, for instance, communicate with you. You can chat with them, they don't have to see you, but then they can write about the challenges they are going through, the processes they are following in the work that they are doing. And this helps you understand what they are doing, and it also helps you communicate to them what you want. It doesn't have to be you going and tapping them and like, hey you, so what's up? And that's a bother to them. There are also tools that you can use to enhance your skill that then help you grow from being an expert beginner to being an expert. You need to know what those tools are. You need to understand how those tools work. And the best way to do this is to join, for instance, developer groups, because then you learn from other people. Otherwise, how would you know what, for instance, is going on? Will you keep Googling? Will you understand how the market works if you don't involve yourself with the people in the market? So I think in ensuring that you have the right structures in whatever thing you do is very important. As a developer, understanding these are my structures in projects, this is how I go about, and even knowing, for instance, for milestones, my milestones will be this, that, and the other, and distributing it well so that you don't overstretch yourself to a point that you can't deliver. And at the same time, you deliver on time, because then you understand how your structures work. It guides you, it makes your processes easier, it makes you more efficient, and I think in doing that, it makes you work faster and in a way, learn better. So I think tools, I would say it's the whole picture, understanding what tools you need to improve your skill, what tools you need to improve your technical skills, to improve your soft skills, to improve, for instance, your communication skills. So making sure that you grow wholesomely as not just a developer, but someone who's in it for business.
And what I've seen, as a beginner, when you're moving through from one company to the other, there's always like a culture of, these are the tools we're used to using as company A, and you're comfortable with it. And so you always have to have a high learning curve of, you go here and find out they don't use Trello, but they use Sprintly, and then you have to, start all over again. And then it becomes even more difficult when you're transitioning. If you've been an expert beginner and you used to be the dev and being behind the scenes and not interacting with the clients and not interacting with even the business side of the company, and then transitioning to be, for example, a CTO, then things get a little bit difficult. I was telling someone, how many of you watch Game of Thrones? Everybody, yeah. You know that scene of Korir holding the dog? Yeah? Spoiler alert. It always feels like that being a CEO and you have devs and you have the business guys. Because as a CTO, you've been as a developer and you understand the processes, and sometimes you could be doing something and trying. Always you can think, and it's not working. Like he was saying, it's just not working. And you try Googling what. As a CTO, I'll understand that with the devs. My devs are actually sitting in this room and feeling me, and then the biz dev being like, this needs to go out, we have a client waiting, money is on the line. So the point is, as an expert beginner, it's good to start off, with that pride of, I don't think we're sitting here saying like an expert beginner is a nobody. I think once you've entered into this field, you're really smart in your own right. It just, you need to adapt very quickly and be in a community. I think the iHub community and the Silicon Savannah has been a big part of us as devs and growing up, because there are people who were there before, and when you're stuck and, coming from a dev side, you don't know anything about writing proposals or how to price even things. So it's a very steep learning curve, but just being open to that and to learn new things, I think, helps in that journey of being a beginner to an actual expert.
Okay, fine. Before Caine comes in, there's a difference between developing an application, leaving it on your computer, developing an application, deploying it, not knowing how many users will come on board, and developing an application expecting millions of users. I see there is a session tomorrow that I hope everyone will attend on architecture for scale by Africa Stockholm. And I would like Caine to touch on how they've structured the architecture, what process they have put in place to be able to manage millions of users.
Thanks. So, as I talk about the stack, maybe I'll also talk about the process of getting to where we are today. So, when I started at Twiga, it was about, the first thing I needed to do was recruit a team. And so the first question I was asking myself, how do I recruit the right team? Reason being, anyone in senior management knows you'll always report either to a CEO or a board. And at that level, you're not really talking about the day-to-day. It's about your output. Have you achieved X, Y, Z by a specific timeline? So once you've communicated the plan, and now you want to implement against that plan, you then now have to think about, okay, how do I do it in such a way I'll give myself the best chance of achieving those objectives? And this goes down to planning. There's a saying about the Japanese that they spend half their time planning and half their time implementing. The reason they're usually so good at implementing is because they've planned it to the last detail. And so, if you don't have a plan, if you just go into it head first, you run the risk of things going anywhere because you didn't take time to think through the consequences. So for me, my whole idea there was I want to recruit in such a way that I de-risk the plan that I have in terms of implementation. So what I did is I started with a grid, So on one side you have, these are the roles I need, and then on the other side you have, these are the people I have available, or these are the kind of people I'd like to recruit. And as you're now recruiting your team, what you want to try and achieve is ensure as many boxes in that grid are filled. So if you have someone who's good at backend and Android, for example, you're basically filled two spaces in the grid. And then as you keep recruiting, you try to fill in as many spaces as possible, whilst the people you have already competent in a certain programming language or a certain framework or a certain way of doing things. So now, when you now go and think of, okay, this is my team, this is the stack I'm building, you now want to make it easy for your team to understand what everyone else is doing. And this goes down to two things. One, your processes, and two, what you as devs want to commit to each other. So if there's ever a problem, let's say on the back end, someone on the front end, on the mobile side of things, can easily go look at the documentation, or go look at the group, and easily understand this is where the issue is, this is what I need to fix. So how we do that is one, I'm sure a lot of us use Slack. We try to centralize as much as possible in Slack. So whenever there's a commit or whenever there's anything happening on the infrastructure, everyone has full visibility into it. I've noticed a tendency of people here to keep things to themselves, which is very weird. Well, interesting, let me put it that way. But actually you don't benefit. Imagine it this way. If I have a problem and I'm working at 11 p.m. and I need to ask you something, you being my colleague, is it easier for me to go into the code or documentation, or do I need to give you a call? A lot of us get calls late at night, and one of the reasons I've seen is because people do not take time to really share or make their what they worked on easily understandable. So in terms of our process, we really try and make sure everything is transparent and accessible to whoever needs it. Of course, within reason. We're not going to put all our system passwords there for anyone to go into, but we must make as much as possible available to whoever needs the information. So that's one aspect. The second thing which as devs I think would really help is document every meeting. In a project, with a project manager, we'll normally do this. But if you're 3 devs working on a team, and you have a meeting and decide, okay, this is my front-end task, these are my back-end tasks, let's meet next week and review. If there's no central place where someone can go and refer to the meeting notes, you'll always go to the next meeting and someone will say, oh yes, I forgot this, I was I forgot. Or what you have is people pulling in different directions and no one noticing until it's too late. So one thing we really need to learn to do as devs is document as much as possible, as mundane as it can seem. Always have a meeting agenda, action items, person responsible, and due date. This now goes to the skills beyond your core technical skills, but it's actually as important to helping you achieve what you want to do. So now, how this ties back to the stack is the day we decide we want to scale. It's very easy for us to go back into history, understand what we did, the decisions we made, our thought process at any particular time, so as to make the right decisions. Sometimes you may try to scale, or you may even go in a different direction and say, okay, now, for example, we want to move to microservices. But if you don't have the background knowledge of how you got to the point you got at, you're then now shooting in the dark, so to speak. So you're trying to scale without the background knowledge. And what normally ends up happening is at some point, the product has performance inefficiencies, and you just decide to refactor the whole code base. So what we're really actively trying to do is make sure that from a stack perspective, everything is documented. It will serve us well as we now scale our platform.
Yeah, so the final thing that we'll discuss, we'll go about is moving now from being a single developer to working in a team, to eventually moving to team leadership. Caine has touched a bit of what was coming, and I think in his speech you had lots of managing risks and all that. And yeah, I would like to open it up to the team leaders here. I know Kago moved from CTO to CEO, and Daisy is speaking about numbers and not ones and zeros. Yeah, so I'll open up that transition from development now to leading a team.
I think it's not easy, and I don't know, for some of us it just happens by accident, where you're in a team until for long enough until you're able to lead it. But it's also an exciting thing, because always I think if you're learning new things every time and growing yourself in that journey of becoming an expert is the best thing. So. It also almost makes you go back to school, and some of us have to go and start learning new tools, because when you're coming from ones and zeros, like you said, and interacting a lot with machines, not people, and also as developers, you don't have very good people skills, and then you have to be in meetings long discussing. Then you have to be involved as well with the strategy of organization. So. It's a tough route, but yet exciting, depending on how you want to take it. I mean, as for me, what I can say is, it opens up your eyes to being an all-rounded person, because you're able to now meet with clients, work on a strategy, and think about where you want to go, plan quickly what you want to implement, what you want to let go, and also be in charge of helping other people grow. Like I said, and I think I keep talking about the community, that has been a very big part of this growth, that people you go back to and be like, started this startup, I just have the tech skills, and what do I do about it? A lot of people have seen here, and the people on this panel as well, we started back at the iHub when we just had a desk and nothing much. And that has been a source of, people you go up and, people you actually can end up being in business as well with. So it's not a tough thing, but, it's a journey that's interesting, but also very tasking.
So I'll try to be brief on this one. I think for me, it's something my dad would always tell me. I think it's about hard work. When you're a beginner, you really have to put that extra effort to make sure that you're getting, you're kind of learning all those things. So, for me, I'm spending like a lot of hours like reading books, being on YouTube, and trying to really get, anywhere where I can get like information, have like this one focus. This is what I want to learn. I want to learn how to speak better to people or speak better to my investors. That's the task. I take it as a problem and I work on it. And then the other thing now that I've realized, moving especially from development to very only management, is that people are extremely important. So when I was a CTO, I was in charge of all the problems in all the direction. Now that I'm CEO, I realize I have a board of 5 unique people who I don't have to deal with problems myself. I'll go to the board and say, hey, you have an experience with scaling tech, in this market, so you have tax problems. And so it's almost that a lot of developers don't realize the people aspect, that you can either decide to take the problems yourselves or distribute it among your networks. And for developers, I think that could be WhatsApp groups. For managers, it could be similar managers in other companies. I've started to realize that there's actually a lot more value in mentorship from people who are doing what you're doing, or even in some cases just blankly reaching out and involving yourself with communities like iHub and all those things. So I think hard work and mentorship is important. I mentioned hard work especially because as an expert beginner, if you're not a professional in a certain place, then you're kind of defining the space. So, I didn't finish university and I knew I was taking that risk, and I always see myself as that person, if you fail at this, then everyone's going to be like, oh, so you see, this guy thought he would be like the next Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and then he wasn't able to make it. So you also have to realize as an expert beginner, you're kind of taking this burden of you need to show that you can succeed. And I think really being able to kind of put that extra effort to make sure that you're faking it properly, and that as you fake it, you're able even to communicate back to people that, hey, I'm reaching these milestones, this is where I'm having the hard duties, and always like setting those challenges for yourself is extremely important.
Sheilah, could you also touch on one of the things that you've dealt with for quite a long time is helping non-technical founders find co-founders who are technical. That seems in line with the leadership.
So leadership is about balance. It's actually a balancing act. You have to manage expectations, first your own, of your team, of your clients, of your investors, for instance, of basically anyone you are in contact with. So a good leader will know how to balance your expectations with, for instance, the clients, and how to manage their expectations of your team as well. And sometimes it's hard because they don't understand you, you don't understand them, but that's where leadership comes in. So when working in a small team, it's not as hard to do as, for instance, when you're working with a big team of diverse skills. It becomes hard for a leader, for instance, to then understand how do I manage the marketing team. They're hyper people, they have a lot of energy, you don't. How do I manage that? How do I also manage the tech team that are not hyper, but then they're also working on equally big problems for the company? How do you manage that? So basically, you have to balance expectations of everyone. So for CEOs who are not technical at all, they're looking for CTOs, I think the biggest challenge I've seen is they're expecting to find someone who is as passionate as them about what they want to solve. And that's hard to do because not everyone thinks like you do, and not everyone sees the problem the way you do. So it's quite hard to find first, equal passion, and then secondly, they don't understand the tech side of stuff, and they want to rush this person they want to work with. So it becomes a challenge sometimes in matching expectations of the non-tech CEO with the tech CTO. And then you also find on the flip side, some people who are very good and then they end up becoming CTOs in 5 startups. And you're wondering, how is that even possible? But you check websites and there are 15 of them. And you're wondering, okay, genius, how do you, 15, that's a bit much. And then later you discover, it doesn't take long actually. 2 months after you see that, you will always find complaints from the CEO about this CTO. And this guy is good. It's not that he's not good. He's really good in what he does. He's actually an expert. But then, because I don't know if they are the equity entrepreneurs who want equity in all startups, or I don't know what they are, but then they end up doing this. So I think in leadership, even for non-tech CEOs, I would say be ready to develop that person before they get to your level. You don't expect to show up at iHub, for instance, and then voila, we give you that ideal, perfect CTO you've been looking for. And sometimes you can outsource a developer who's not extremely good, but then they work with a team or a person who's good, and they learn, and then eventually transition to being the CTO of your company. So it's about investing in your time, in their time, and I think also them investing their time in your vision. I think that's the balance that any non-tech CEO needs to have. Don't expect them to be there today, but be ready to wait sometimes. Be ready to invest in developing their skill, and then be ready to wait on them to grow into this ideal person that you want or you're hoping them to be.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes remaining, so start thinking about your questions before Caine speaks. All the things you thought about, you meant clients who want you to sign 10 NDAs before you begin a project. Don't think that you will see the ideas, the usual programming wars between different languages and stacks, Linux versus Windows, Ruby, Python. Think about it.
And remember, as you go up the managerial ladder, you now end up managing managers. So you also have to now think about how they'll perceive what you're doing and how they actually communicate that down, because you also have to make sure your vision is translated all the way to the bottom. The challenge is always between strategy and execution. You can spend time defining the best ideas, the best product, the best way forward. But if there's a delta between that and how your team is executing operationally, then you run into challenges. So as a manager, it's just making sure what that vision or that strategy translates down into the actual execution of your work or the product you're building. Understand the kind of milestones you want to measure yourself against. A lot of times, you get your co-founder, you say, I want this product, and then they will say, yes, it will be ready in 6 months. Then what you find is they don't go into the process of understanding what is it what will the product look like. As Kago mentioned, do you enough scoping, or do you understand what the outcome should be? If that's not clear, you find people pulling in different directions. So I'd advise the people looking for technical co-founders, one, look for the right kind of co-founder, and two, set very, very clear expectations of what you want to evaluate at what particular time. I think that will then help mitigate some of the issues you see between non-technical and technical co-founders. Thanks.
Time is not on our side. Is there any burning question? Serious burning question?
Been to iHub a couple of times to make complaints about some of the developers that are hosted there, including I think iLimu, which is next door. I'm not an IT person. I'm from a different industry, but I've engaged several developers over the last couple of years. And I need to open my heart out. So I faced a lot of challenges, okay? As I said, I'm not an IT person, so you can't expect a non-developer to understand your industry and what it involves in terms of building an app or a software, okay? So that should come from the professionals. Who are you guys? So when it comes to the NDA, the contract, the timeline, scope of work, you need to tell us, this is what we need to do before we start a project. I like what you said about the Japanese. They normally take 70 to 80% of the time planning. Most developers, you get into a project, you say, sawa, 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 you start to jump into it. No flow, what do you call it? Flow diagrams, okay? You miss a lot of stuff. And then we come up to the bug interfaces. But let me just list some of the challenges. Number one, the first one is communication. You guys never communicate. If you want to do business, yeah, you need to be able to sit with the client. Remember, he's paying you. So he needs feedback to know where the project is at. Because remember, he's come to you to solve an issue, okay? And so he needs to have a timeline of when this project is going to be delivered. So you need to be able to know that, give him, if it's a weekly update, this is where we've reached. Don't tell me, let's chat on GitHub and then I'll give you the status update. I hate that. I've experienced it. Meet me face to face, I don't want to Skype, okay? I want you to sit down and tell me, this is where we are at, these are my challenges, I'm behind by one or two milestones. Okay, I need more time, or I need to engage another developer, or I lack the skills. Okay. Number two, integrity. We need to sign those NDAs, even if there are 10 of them. You guys are very tricky, in my experience. So you need to be business-like. Look at yourself as an organization, not a developer. I think that's where the problem is. You know. You all look at yourself like, I'm a dev. You're not a business entity. You're not thinking that I can survive on this, on my skills and build an industry out of it. You're thinking from contract to contract, hand to mouth.
And I think that's why there's such few ICT companies in Kenya. I don't see many of you driving Range Rovers. It's because you keep on playing these games that you play. So integrity. I am just sharing. Okay, so let me go back. I need to be on the panel. Okay. So I've started severely. I'm sorry. That's why I'm opening up. That's why I'm here. Because I thought maybe someone from the outside needs to come and share. She spoke about a lawyer coming to iHub to make a complaint. I spoke to Jessica and the PS of ICT, Victor Kichalo, at the Unique conference. We had a session on ICT, and they're looking at Kenya as the next Silicon Valley for Africa, whatever. Which, as Wanjau said, maybe it's true. You do have the skills, but you are not looking at yourselves as business people. You don't give timelines. You don't deliver. You deliver for yourself. If the project is yours, you do it well and good. But when you're dealing with a third party, your client, very rarely you guys deliver. Okay? So, one point is finished. Okay? So, I think integrity is key. Having those legal documents covered, not switching off someone's website, not overcharging them for a domain which costs maybe $10, and then you're busy charging people 10,000 shillings for a domain or hosting, things like that. It's a big issue in your industry. Multitasking, learn to say no, do one project at a time. Because remember, especially if you're an individual, you're a brand. Okay? So if your brand is not delivering, then people will stop trusting you. And then you spoil your name and you're unable to get more jobs. So I think you need to just say no, work on one project, give yourself 3 months, eat from that, or learn how to grow a business. Payments. If you're going to demand payments from somebody, please deliver or return the money. Okay? You can't be paid for doing half a job. And most of you developers will be like, I need a deposit before I start the work. Okay, so you start, then you have no skills, you switch off your phone, because you don't have an office, you can't be found. You know, like someone has paid you money. Fine. Even if you consider the cost of the amount of money too little, you agreed to it. You could have said no, or this money will only cover this scope of work, and this is what I'm going to do. Over and above that, this is what I'm going to charge, and that way there's a contract to that effect. These are my deliverables, and you pay me either at each and every milestone or at the end of the project. And for me, because I've paid people before, after even full amounts in advance, I think you should be paid after you deliver. So kindly do not accept any money from people. Then there is the know-it-all attitude, whereby you come to a business person, you say you can do 1, 2, 3. They tell you this is what I need. Then you go and build what you think he needs. Okay? Or I tell you I need a web application, you want to give me a desktop application. Remember, the person engaging you knows more about his business than you do. So what you're supposed to do is take his issues, okay, and give him what he wants. You can advise him on better ways to get solutions for whatever he has, but don't go and imagine that, build something else that he can't use in his business. So take what he's asking you to do and do it as it is, at the very minimum. Number 6, I think.
Okay, so then let me.
After this, I will leave. I won't come back. Okay.
As you can. So I think.
Let me just share.
Okay.
I'm about to share. Okay. One of the solutions I think developers should come up with is, number 1, we need an association, a professional association, like the doctors and the lawyers. Okay? Okay, I don't know whether it exists. Okay? Whereby you guys can self-regulate each other. It's very important. Otherwise, if many people are complaining to iHub,
It's only because we don't have a platform to go and complain, and I'm sure you get many complaints. So you need a place where you can self-regulate each other, blacklist people, the way the lawyers do and the doctors do, so that you improve your industry, okay? Then I propose maybe an accreditation center for ICT people. Different schools, different level of skills, okay? There's a gap, okay? Some people don't know some programs, I don't know a lot of coding. So I'm just saying you need a place where, like the lawyers, in a school of law, where you get a certificate of some sort to prove that you're actually knowledgeable in that particular skill, okay? So that we are being practical. You don't just go and learn theory, then you can't actually build a website or a mobile app. We need something to give us that. And lastly, no, you can complain, but I'm just giving you the facts, okay? The last thing is, again, I'll emphasize, look at yourselves as businesses. As he was saying, Kago, I think you have a good mentors. Mentorship could be an issue in the industry because most of you leave school and then all of a sudden you're a developer. You need to learn how to do a business, maybe take a business course, okay? You need to do sales and marketing, customer care, how to handle your customers, build systems into your businesses, accounting systems, management skills. You need all that in order for you to grow an organization. So that if you're not at work today, you can still earn tomorrow. I think I'll close with that. And please be gentle. Yes.
You have valid points, and I get a lot of similar stuff. And I'll tell you what I tell everyone. When you walk into a hospital and you find someone wearing an apple, you don't automatically assume he's a doctor. And you also mentioned another very valid point. When you're working with third party, it's easy because then they are managing that whole process for you. So some of the clients we meet, they meet someone, for instance, at iHub, and they think this person is a developer. They don't ask us, then later they come to us and say, this person did not deliver. And even for doctors, by the way, they are quack doctors. With that body, they are quack doctors. So I can't say we can victimize an entire sector because of individuals. Even farmers, they are bad farmers. So it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. So what I'm saying is be ready to invest in finding good people to work with to get good products.
And be willing to pay.
Yes.
So, I totally agree. So if you are going to go and you are looking for a carpenter, right? If you go to the first guy who comes up and says, I can build your table for 2,000 shillings, I feel there are clients who see that and they're like, wow, this is the best bargain ever. And sometimes I think it should be obvious, even when you kind of see these price points too low or when a developer is negotiating too much, you should suspect that person, right? Because if you're going to pay for all the things that you mentioned, for example, Korir, that's why he has his consulting company, because he will help you kind of think through all that, and it's expensive. And if you want to have someone, I think what I can say is I can resonate with your point about the developer body, not because I think it's something that should be formalized, but when I look at like great developers in the room, Korir, Jacob, Prosper, I'm thinking if I want to, find a dev, those are the people who I ask. Do you have a dev who maybe, you didn't have a use for or stuff like that? I think there should definitely be some sort of way to vet your dev against some sort of have kind of like not an association, but essentially be able to get a great referral. Another thing I'd suggest for you is, if it's going to cost a lot to hire a developer for a project, try and get someone to manage the project for you. So even though it's not a technical co-founder, try and get someone who understands technology, who can then help you kind of do the hiring process. But in the end, it will come down to, if you want this work done well, in the right way, it's going to cost much more than going to your next developer and being like, hey, I have this project, yeah, let's do it, let's go. You'd have to be way more invested in that process to work with a carpenter who doesn't know a lot. And most of the times, it could mean going to their house every day. Like if I know I'm working with someone who's not extremely professional, I just show up all the time until they're just used to me, and you'll be surprised that things will get done the way you want them done.
Unfortunately, we are short of time. I wish this could go on, but you're in the right place. Part of the conference is to address exactly what you've mentioned. It's not part, it's actually the conference is meant to address the craft itself. So thanks for the feedback. It's something we face as a company also, in terms of getting developers to join the team delivery. These panelists and the developers are here, so feel free to engage them informally. I would like to thank the panelists, Sheilah from iHub, Kago from Eneza Education, Marie from eLimu, Caine from Twiga Foods, and being a moderator, Leo from Mobidev. Thanks, and let's interact informally. Thank you.